Hi, everybody. So yeah, Chad Martin. I am the Director of Social and Emerging Media for a company called VML. We're actually in Kansas City, not St. Louis. But we're based in Kansas City, but we're a global company of 2,500 people. So yeah, we do work with some big brands. And I want to talk today about how we develop social media strategy. We come at it, as you're saying, from a very different perspective. We tend to be the content creators, and we try to tell the stories, and we try to do all those things on behalf of the brand. So we also spend a lot of money on their behalf as well. So we do a lot of advertising. We've had to work out a system that is not just fire things out, not just do what do you got, put it out there stuff. Gone are the days of let's have a Facebook page. You know, that's a long, long time ago. So over the course of years, I've developed really a sequence of events that we go through in a working session throughout the course of a day or sometimes 2 days with clients, decision makers, agency people, everybody involved. And we really work through this whole process. We have to talk about it in depth. We have to talk where we start. We have to talk about what we measure and what we use moving forward. So I always like to talk about it as we start from a 40,000-foot look, the role of social. Why are we even here? What are we doing in our world? What do you tell the president or CEO of the company? Why do we have this many people on staff and what we're doing? All the way down through how we create content, when, what we do, how we measure it, and then go back up in front. And so really from a perspective that I would challenge you guys on is to think about your social more in a strategic play and really get in there and justify it that way as opposed to just putting stuff out. So we're going to talk, I'll go quickly through here in the 30 minutes I have, but keep in mind too, as we come back around, measurement to me might be the most important part, and we can talk about that later, but it could be very well first as well to understand what the community's already saying. So with the role of social, in your world, you know, there's so many things. There's no right and there's no wrong. We've done things for, one of the things that's a good example is Wendy's. We started with them 3 years ago, and they had lost a generation. They completely lost my generation. They had my parents and maybe even older that would go to the salad bar. If you guys remember salad bars at Wendy's? You're too young to remember salad bar at Wendy's. Oh, okay, all right. But so then you'd go in there, they had pretty much lost it. So our only goal for social was to get a generation to fall in love with us again. So we had to work on that and just be cool and try to do different things. Once again, there's no right or there's no wrong, but this is definitely the goalpost you run towards at all times when you're doing social content. So what are you trying to do? Are you trying to pour gas in the fire of your .com? Are you trying to drive people to it? Are you trying to earn share of voice in a competitive set? What are you trying to do? And it's just a quick outline and understanding that. But once again, as you go through the whole process, this will be the main reason you're doing social and creating content. Developing a voice is critical. And it might seem a little bit odd in the world you guys are in too, that you've got so many people that are creating content, developing a voice. But you know, one of the things I always say is humans connect with humans, not logos. So how do you create that voice? Who are you going to be? What are you going to say? The voice part is super important because you need to train the consumer, the content consumer, the personal consumer, the brand consumer, and how you're going to engage with them. They want to understand that better. They don't want things coming at it from every angle. They want to understand as you try to stop their thumb what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. So really consider the voice. And this is not only in creating content overall, but it would be very much in your community management when you decide what to engage with, who to engage with, how you're going to do it. The voice is super important. And I think, you know, I have had conversations with some that this might be difficult because of all the different avenues you guys are trying to attack. But however, consider if you were a brand, what would that person look like? We literally come up with visuals and names and descriptions that we stick on walls of people that are creating content so that they can better understand what kind of voice they should be. We also then, the next level is, so we're up here, why are we doing it, how we're going to do it, and then this is the next level, how we're going to do it. Content pillars. This is really, as 3 or 4 or 5 emotional connections you can make with an already active audience. People out there, if all you guys, jobs and offices disappeared, people would still talk about news. In the same sense, they still talk about cheeseburgers or Gatorade or cell phones and how bad their Sprint coverage is. Nobody works for Sprint here, right? They're a client. Don't worry about it. They know that. But how do you fill these buckets? These are 3 or 4 or 5 different angles you come at the social content creation. So these are not outward facing. Nobody out there knows that you're creating these pillars, if you will, but over the course of, say, 30 days, you're filling these buckets up so that it mandates diversity. It mandates you're coming at things from a different angle. So, I'm trying to think of an example exactly, but it really, it kind of boils down from what you really want to do and how you're going to say it. Then what are you going to tell the whole world, these different kind of connections? And it can, as you go through here and you create these, you're going to have different things that we call storylines as well. And those could be timely events. Those could be back to school. Those could be, I don't know, even things that happen for a week on a calendar. But you tell it through these lenses. So you give diversity. It mandates diversity on your social channels. This is really important, and I think we've talked about a lot of different platforms, but somehow Facebook always comes up. Twitter definitely comes up because that's obviously about moments, but I think this is a critical one to think about. Don't think you have to all of a sudden be in Meerkat or the next thing just because it comes out. There's something we said for others that have said, test and learn, try things out, totally get that. But sometimes that's maybe a tactical play at this stage, learning from it, understanding it, how can you do it? But pick one or two that you guys think you can really win in and do well and build it and put the focus inside there and understand it. This is not just advice I give you guys, it's advice I give big brands too, because so many times they're like, well, we got to be all over here, and what are we going to do in Snapchat, and what are we going to do here? Well, let's do some really good stuff in one platform and understand it better, and then move on and build from it, because then you can even use those insights to better understand, because you might also find out that, guess what, we need to go completely into a video player kind of scenario or whatever it might be. You have to really understand what kind of platform and content you're going to really get the best bang for your buck in. Calendaring, we do this a lot. It's a mandatory for us because we create so many pieces of content with so many different messages that we definitely want to be out in front of it. And I guess I would ask that you guys decide how far out front you can be. Are there certain things that you can decide, guess what, we're going to have in the can 3 weeks ahead of time? These stories that are extending stories, these stories that need to be there, what do you do? Because there will always be that last minute thing that pops up. There's no question about it. But having things on a calendar and better understanding it so you're not always reacting, you're out in front of it. Absolutely necessity. There's different things you can do inside tools that help you. Cheap tools, free tools, and expensive tools all the same. But creating a calendar is definitely something that can even inspire concepts as you go through because you see it ahead of time and you're already working on it. Agility. This is the one. This is kind of the next level thing, and we really push the real-time versus timely versus water cooler, and especially in a community management kind of way. This is something I came up with. This is with Gatorade. An example there exactly. Real-time to them was. Well, we found a stock photo of a locker that looks like it could be Wimbledon, so we want to do a Serena Williams post about it and push it out at the time when she goes out on center court. It's not. That's a stock photo. It just happens to be there. So real time to me, to us, is that content that you're there. So as we worked on this, we got Serena Williams to actually shoot a photo of her locker and send it to us, and we wrote something about it, and it was legit. That's content that nobody else can get. That's totally Gatorade's, right? But then timely, what is a different kind of message you're telling? It doesn't have to be, we're badass and we're right there at Serena's locker, but what is the message that is right there that you can still talk about in that time? Is it that she won 6 Wimbledons or whatever it might be? But then even water cooler conversation can be, what if we just took that message back in and really did a good job and put it out at tomorrow when we knew our consumers were most engaged at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So we're still talking about the same event, but we're talking about it in a different context, in a different light, and even in a completely different way, maybe an extended form. So I would really suggest you look at that kind of stuff in the way, and even an extension of content. We definitely do that as we measure. I'll talk about that too, but as we measure, we look at different things and say, wow, this might fall into our calendar for days to come because it has gotten great engagement. Image guidelines is another very important one. I talked about stopping the thumb. We definitely want to train the consumer on, or the public on, what our content is going to look like. Facebook is now getting to the spot where they're measuring a pause in your thumb, not just a stop or not a view. They're pausing or even flying by. So consider that if they're doing that, that means that everybody's not just dying to stop and consume content. They do it so quickly, they fly by. You all do it because there's a BuzzFeed article, then there's a picture of your stupid neighbor's kid, and then a picture of, whatever, and then guess what? Some important information comes through. Well, I get it, news outlet, whatever, you get it. So if they don't consume the content, at least train them on what it's going to look like. You're always going to have your avatar and your name up there. So consider that. Just consider, and then consider even what you can really do. I think that's important. We can make up the coolest thing in the world, but if you can't actually execute against it, you're not training anyone. This is always a great thing to do and see, no matter where you're coming from, is to understand your competitive set and understand what they're doing. Not hopefully in a way that you want to rip it off, and understand, more than ripping them off, understand what they're doing and really know your place. I think is more than anything the way to do it is understand where you can win, what you can do, and how you can inside there not be the same, but stand apart. And then even I would say look at crush brands. And then we look at crush. What I call a crush brand is just somebody who thinks doing a great job. That might be somebody that is in the car with you or in the same household, like in a consumer brands kind of way. If you're driving a certain kind of car, what kind of phone would you have? What kind of this would you have? Are you going to buy these kinds of clothes? Are you shopping at Nordstrom, or are you shopping at TJ Maxx or whatever? So think about those kinds of things inside the world that you're playing in, and look at that and see how they're doing it, because you can then better understand how they're talking to the consumer. This is a great one. So influencers to us in a brand world are people we pay. There's no question about it. We pay them with something, with either money or product or fame. We white label them and get another 10 million people to see their tweet, or so on and so forth. But consider what you have for these guys. So reporters are influencers, right? They're hired guns. They're there for now. Who knows what they're going to do? But how do you guys suggest how they can win there too? I say that all the time, and how people can win. You've got these different places where you're going to win. But how do you get them to do things for you? Obviously, they want the message to be out there. Then how do you get even other community influencers in there, or thought leaders inside the world? So it could be right on message influencers, or it could just be people in the community that you want to spread that word through. So what can you do for them, and how can you rally them, or even get them on your team, I guess? Then in the community management world, I think this is one where so many brands lose here. They don't look at it as an opportunity. So in the brands way I'm talking about, we might create a couple hundred pieces, 300 pieces of content a month for the brand. So that's a lot. And we look at it from different perspectives, different platforms, and so on and so forth, different cadence, times a day, whatever. But think about with community management, you should be able to do that a day. You should be able to do 100 pieces of engagement and content a day. So understanding your voice, understanding what your goals are, why you would engage with them, what you would do, and so on and so forth, how you can extend the message. Pour gas on the fire, I say all the time, but how do you do that? And really better understand it, because they can not only further that message, but they can be your front line of measurement. So if you have a big data kind of scenario you're playing, if you have a measurement, tool and or process you're going through, these guys are your front line. They should be the ones that say, man, I saw this 5 times in an hour, and I don't even know what it is, but guess what? We have to do something. We do that all day. It's some of our best stuff came from insights, frontline insights. So I definitely consider that. Personalizing the message is always great too. People out in the world love to be recognized. That's just one simple insight that I would say. They love to be recognized. And even if you just look at their feed, take the time and use their name, not like awkwardly and creepy, but if I say something to a brand out there and they come back and say, that's a great point, Chad. Have you ever seen this, or whatever it might be? Guess what? A robot doesn't do that. A human has to do that. So how do they extend the message with me, and what are their goals, and how do they keep that going? But humanize it. I can't say enough how humanizing is such a big deal in social media. And measurement. There's 1,001 things you can measure. There's so many things out there, but what is it? How do you guys win? What do you guys do to get either budgets increased or viewership or whatever it is, and set those different levels of goals. Set the short-term goals and then even the long-term goals as you move the needle, and work towards that. There's so many different things. Sentiment is a great one. Engagement is one that is there. More fans and followers is always out there. Typically, that's tough nowadays because you have to buy all that. But so many times I've heard, well, my boss said, you get me to 1 million followers and we can talk. So, I mean, if you have to do that, I don't know, it's not ideal. But then think of one of the important things with everything is timing, but in the measurement is as you put things out, pieces of content, who is doing what, how is it happening? It can't very well happen on the third Thursday of every month. It has to be kind of real time. You have to be doing it. You have to understand it, even if it's kind of in a makeshift way. I mean, we're lucky that we have big brands with budgets, and we use these pretty ornate tools that we can use for calendaring and content management and creation and engagement and da-da-da-da-da. But even if it's just an Excel doc or a Google doc where you can talk about things and put people's names in there and understand what they're saying and get them to come back there, because if there is something you need to engage with them on, they could be an influencer or they could just be somebody that talked about this cool new thing. Well, how do you get them involved? So measurement is a huge deal. That's really, I rushed you here because I knew there'd be some questions, but I really believe that in the grand scheme of things, strategically setting your roadmap is so important. You have to start with up there the why you're doing it, and then go through how and when you're going to do it, and better understand that, and then measure it and start it all again. And ruthlessly measure, I guess that's what I would say, is we tag all of our posts with different content pillars, with the different stories, with the different types of efforts we're doing. We tag them every which way, and we painfully cut things that are not working. We don't put money on things that are not working. We only go with the winners. And we do that all the time, every day. And so I guess that's kind of how I'd wrap it up, and definitely open for any questions.
So I'll get us kicked off here because I had the benefit of spending more time. These content pillars were so interesting to me. What we're doing in my newsroom right now is so there was this great Neiman Lab post a few years ago about how, I don't know if you guys saw it, about how NPR had categorized its Facebook post. They'd done some research and they had like 9 types of content that does well on Facebook, right? And it's like community pleasers and awe-inspiring visuals or something. And it's interesting because you can actually take the content people engage with and come up with your own coding system, right? So like look at what people actually pay attention to and say, well, people liked this because it tapped into community pride. People like this because it introduced them to someone in the community they didn't know. People like this because it made them feel smarter about a complex issue. So whatever it is for you in your newsroom, there aren't quick answers, and the answers are obviously going to be different for you guys than they are for Gatorade. But it is a really useful exercise for me to look at what's working for me on Facebook in my newsroom across the street. And the hard part, as Chad closed by saying, is what do you decide not to do? Because no matter how much I think that a priority for my newsroom is a certain kind of coverage, if people aren't engaging with it, why do I keep putting it out there? So
and I build on that by saying, yeah, the Facebook pillars are interesting, but how do you then extend the story? Because we do know that Twitter is about moments and Facebook is an extended story, and so on and so forth. And then however you get to your .com is obviously the end story, right? Because there could be video content, there could be anything else, but how do you decide what content to put where and when, and not be so hard-lined? Maybe you tweet out the same article 3 different times from 3 different perspectives at 3 different points in the day, targeting 3 different audiences. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's a test. Try it. And so, yeah, the angles, I guess, I always look at these as lenses you look through as you're developing and putting content out there.
Yeah, the emotional connections were key for me.
Yeah.
How am I making people feel?
Right.
So when you said you should be able to create 100 pieces of content like that, that might have sent shudders through a few people working in a couple of newsrooms around here. So explain that a little bit further and talk about what you mean. Is that layered content? Is that redeploying, A/B testing? What is that?
Yes. Okay. Next question. No, no, it absolutely is. So in our world, and I would assume it's similar to you guys, that we have community managers that's their job. So they are really good at engaging and talking to people, furthering the conversation. So we would have a content calendar, and it would be created for this week. They're very familiar with it, understand it probably better than anybody, because they've kind of formed it and put it together, and they understand the story arc for that week, for example, just for conversation's sake. So they understand that. And actually, they go as far as, I even challenge them sometimes on the spot, but just even jacking around saying, so what's the response? What are you going to say? What do you think the reaction is going to be for this? They think about that ahead of time and craft things that they know they can put in their little war chest for that week that they can go back with. Because there might be a meme that pops up that's like, oh, wow, that fits in right over here, you know, and so those kinds of things. So they're just sitting there all day, every day with searching for keywords or influencers or different things out there that might come at them, and would create content relative to that one thing in the hopes that we're doing a one-to-one that might be 1 to 1,000, then 1 to 1,000,000. And the example that's a good example is the LeBron James story. Oh, geez, I started, so I have to tell you now. So the finals, this was awesome. The finals last year, we had a community manager. She's awesome. LeBron James was cramping up. Finals last year? Yeah, it was last year, I think. But he was cramping and went to the bench, and all of a sudden, Gatorade's Twitter handle blew up. It's like, oh, your boy's cramping. I thought you guys were talking about this or that. And our community manager just simply said back, he's not our boy. He doesn't drink Gatorade. And because he's a Powerade paid player. Oh my God. I can't, I'm not even joking. I'm getting chills thinking, because this is like social media magic. This is perfect. This is like, hey, we got 2 unicorns, right? And so it was awesome. And in the end, billions of impressions. I don't even remember the number, but it was so many zeros you can't even imagine. To the point where LeBron even walked out to the press conference and sat down, because Gatorade's an NBA sponsor, took the Gatorade bottle off and put it on the ground and then answered questions. And we're all high-fiving each other like, we just won the internet, totally won, right? So that's the idea of that subtlety and being empowered to do that and so on and so forth. And PepsiCo shit their pants. I'm not gonna lie, they freaked out when we did that, but you know, but it is those kinds of things. It's like right now, doing it in the moment, and that's just one example. And then how does that story go? Because then she was the next, I don't know, 48 hours just engaging with people that are there, and she's just like, hey, I'm not trying to talk smack on LeBron, but he's a Powerade guy. You know what I mean? So.
And it's key to say you're not going at 97, 98.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, just doing it. Yep.
Chad, you said that you ruthlessly measure and then painfully cut things that aren't working.
Yeah.
How long do you wait to see if it's working? And how do you figure it out?
So in the scheme of like with what we talk about, there's things that I guess I would say are in pencil, and then things that are in pen. So the role of social, you can't really move the needle if you change why you're doing social every month or 2, right? That should be kind of a long-term deal, even if it's at least 6 months or 8 months, you know, maybe even a year. Then the social voice, that should be it. Unless you have a major like shake-up and things change drastically, your voice should be set. The content buckets or pillars are things that you could give them a month and measure against them and see what they're doing. You might take a flyer on something and say, I think this is a really cool idea, but it might not work out. And so you just get rid of it. Because out in the world, they don't even know you have these buckets. You're just trying them out, seeing what gets traction. So that's what I would say is we usually give a content pillar 30 days, because we create enough content against that pillar and we tag it as it goes out to the world. So we measure whatever we want to measure, engagement, shares, and you know, so on and so forth. So that would be where I would say you ruthlessly cut, and it just goes away, and you just put something else in there, no big deal.
One of the things my newsroom has talked about with the content pillars is if we know that there are things that work, something that's super different if you're Gatorade or if you're running a community newsroom is that you don't control the news, right?
Yeah.
So maybe you don't have anything nostalgic today.
Yeah.
And yet, we should do a way better job of identifying stories that have long legs and trotting them
Right.
back out from time to time. So we now have
Right.
pre-written social posts for stories we want
Yeah.
to trot back out. And when we say, wow, we really need a dose of happy,
There's always something you talk about, you know, throwback stuff. There's always is, you know what I mean? And that's the thing is even then better understanding too, you know, the hashtag TBT things, right? Do you guys dive in on that? I don't know. I mean, we do with some brands, we don't with others. It works really well with some. For some reason, Gatorade is another one that works really well with them. Wendy's. Don't know why. I don't know why people
salad bar.
Yeah. Salad bar, right? Yeah. Hashtag salad bar.
Chad, when you talk about why, you totally get my attention with social media. A lot of media brands have dual purposes. Part of your social media is an editorial product, and some of it is marketing.
Yeah.
And I've never been able to solve
Yeah, and I think the thing that I've learned even from brands is that you can't sell something that doesn't perform really well. You know what I mean? We can't expect anybody to engage with us if we just try to go pile in on something and go, we need to promote this one thing for 90 days and here you go. Now make it work. The only way to do that is spend many millions of dollars to get the eyes on it, right? So you kind of have to make it work and let it rise up and be a known entity, get a following, get an engagement, get a community is the way I'd even really say it. Get a community going and then monetize it. You can't just start, like I've worked with a league I won't name, a professional major sports league that I won't name that is basically like, nope, get us a whole bunch of money and we'll get every player in there. And I'm like, that's not the idea. Let's get in there, show how good they can be, show what they can do, because I'll guarantee you can get 10 times the amount of money once you show how awesome they are than you can starting right here. Does that kind of answer your question a little bit?
I'll give you an example.
Okay. All right.
So this is an old example, but running Entertainment Weekly, the editors thought they owned the social brand, the social channel. The marketers thought they owned it. Both had legitimate purposes, and there's no who should be in charge of the EW Twitter account, the Facebook account.
Well, I guess I would say, without any more background on that, that a social expert should be in charge of that. Because once you start developing this stuff, when a different BU or a different department or different whatever comes at you, you can say, that's great, I appreciate what you want to do. It either really, okay, so it affects our role of social, it does that, and we might not say it the way you want to say it, but we'll say it our way, we're still going to say it, and then we're going to look at it through this lens and say it right here. Or you can come back and go, time out guys, you know, we're Mercedes, we don't put coupons out, right? So that's how you have to kind of look at it through that way. So I think the problem is, what you asked is, I'll give you the answer of neither one of those guys, because their mindset is not engagement. They're not building a community. They're not trying to create that wave, that whatever. They have one goal of selling or that.
More questions? Yeah. Hi, Chad.
Hello.
When you're talking about brand and you're talking about voice and being human, what kind of advice do you give to brands, and this could apply to news brands or not to news brands, that are more, you know, our legacy brands and are maybe, you know, feeding in from the Mercedes example, you know, what advice do you give to brands to transition their voice from something that may be seen as, you know, your grandfather's brand and needs to be into something different?
I would always consider the audience and the brand voice of being different, even though at some point they might be extremely similar. So understand how grandparents talk to grandkids. So maybe that's how it starts off, right? Or maybe you need to completely shift it and say, well, okay, so we're gonna just go for it, and we're gonna pull the Band-Aid off and say we're gonna change our voice and we're gonna become younger. But you can't provide the same kind of content with that voice, because then it becomes weird. You have to shift. And then have to take the lumps too of saying, guess what? We can tell by Facebook Insights that our audience is over here, but we don't want that audience anymore. We want a different audience. So you got to kind of take the lumps of maybe alienating them a little bit and chasing down the new audience. It's probably better for you and more engaged, or more likely to be engaged. Absolutely true. Well, all the brands that don't do this kind of stuff, because we're obviously the smartest, they don't do this kind of stuff. They're the ones that jump in on Talk Like a Pirate Day and the dress. A couple of people brought the dress thing up. The brands we work with have no role in there. There's just no way you should jump in and be that. You know, the memes, those things. There are certain brands that works for, but if you are core to what you're doing in your voice and the content you want to create, back to the point of you just say, no, this doesn't work for us. You look at it, we look at that stuff all day, and even go way down the road of saying, well, how can we make Talk Like a Pirate Day? Because it's super engaging, as stupid as it sounds, and there's tons of conversation about Talk Like a Pirate Day, but it's like, how do we get it to work for Gatorade? It doesn't. Or Sprint, I don't know, do we give a discount if you walk in that day and put your order in like a pirate? It's like, I don't know, it's kind of funny, but really weird. Yeah, exactly, a salad bar. If you take your hook and pull your food out. But is that what you're kind of talking about in the sense that it's like, why are you here talking about this and filling up my news feed? Yeah. And I think that's the other thing too, is being respectful, training those people to know what kind of content they're going to get. That's what all this is about. And all the brands we've talked about, and Wendy's, we have great engagement. Followers love us. They love engaging with us, but we've trained them and they've trained us on what they want. And we provide it at the right time and not too much, because we can tell if we put too many pieces of content in their news feed through a paid model, we can tell when there's fall off and when there's less engagement. So we stop, say, okay, great, that's good. We hit the threshold, and then we go do something else. Uh-oh. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Great question. Own it immediately. That's it. It's, once again, trying to humanize the brand. Everybody knows you jacked up, or we jacked up. There's no question about it. Saying, wow, super sorry, completely inappropriate. If you want to call this number to talk about it or do this or that, we always just own it. And it's painful for brands and big entities to say that, to allow that. But I guess the other thing is, I hope there's so many checks and balances that doesn't happen. You know what I mean? But when it does, just own it. And I think that's the thing too, is if you're building a community and you're really engaging and doing the right thing there, people will jump on your defense. People will say, okay, so they made a mistake, leave them alone. We've had that happen too. Just get over it, right? Well, and I think that comes back to the social voice, because if you're in your role of social, if you want to break stuff and you're just going to roll the dice and be desperate about being the first one out there, that's what you're going to deal with. You know what I mean? If that's what you want, but you also going to it's Vegas at that stage, right? You're going to lose or you're going to win, right? So I think that's just, deciding on how hairy you want it to be overall.
All right, that's
Cool.
it for Chad. Thank you, sir.